How about that? Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Susan Gillis here, Boca Raton Historical Society Museum. Welcome to our lecture series, Boca History 102.
Come here, Fisher.
Little technical difficulty here. Mute your microphone. We have muted your microphones. We're trying to. So please do not unmute and don't join with video, because we are going to record this session and we're going to provide a link to the recording to all our participants. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, we're good now. All right, a little technical difficulty. So briefly, this presentation was based on an exhibit we did back in, I think, 2007. And I was assisted in putting that together with a few ladies you may remember, Pat Jakubik, Hilda Franco, Ginger Rogers, and Bernice Flam, all of whom were around in Boca Raton in the 1950s. And all of whom are gone, with the exception of Ginger, shout out to Ginger, and of fond memory. So we dedicate this little presentation in their honor. So let's set the stage as we travel back in time. In the late 40s, Federal Highway was widened through Boca Raton from 2 to 4 lanes. And so slowly but surely, Federal becomes the main drag as opposed to Dixie Highway. On your left, you can see Federal looking north from about Southeast 2nd, 3rd Street, something like that. And on the right is a view at the same time looking south from Town Hall. You can see Town Hall on the right. The traffic signal there is at Boca Raton Road, which is the little road that is just north of Town Hall. And of course, in those days, it was through street all the way from the railroad tracks to 5th Avenue. And part of the street was vacated when Sanborn Park was enlarged in the early 1980s. Now, this is a fun one. So this is Federal Highway looking north from south of Camino Real in the mid-50s. And I don't know about you, but I see a bunch of nothing. So on the right today would be Royal Palm Yacht Country Club. And I understand there were a lot of accidents at Camino and Federal because there was no light there for many years. This is Federal looking north from about Northeast 6th Street, and I guesstimate that based on the curvature of the road. And that is our police chief, Chief Brown, Brownie as he was known, and he is apparently looking at another officer who's across the street. Don't know what they're up to. This is before radar guns. And his vehicle is over there on the right-hand shoulder. In 51, the Boca Raton Chamber was organized. And by 53, they have this interesting little building, which was across the street from Town Hall and up a block. So it faced west. And you can see the members hanging out under the porch, lying in wait for any prospective tourists or new residents or businesses to town. Pretty soon, they got a more permanent building. This very cool, what we call MIMO building, that stands for Miami Modern, very retro, very in vogue again, at 2151 North Federal Highway. So that was kind of far up north on US 1. And today, the building's still there. It's home to the Blue Ocean Poke restaurant, speaking of trendy. Well, our downtown shopping district was really Boca Raton Road, at least in the late 40s, early 50s. And these little buildings still exist. You can see with the inset, they've been dramatically altered. They've been Mediterraneanized a number of years ago. The post office is where the Chabad Lubavitch was. And in about 1950, we get our first department store, Roadman's. And we also have Dave's grocery store, formerly Morris's Groceries, there in the 2-story building. Frank Sundries also belonged to Mr. Roadman. And those buildings still exist. On the left is a view of the street from the center of what is now Sanborn Square. And interestingly, you can see it, it's labeled Main Street. To the right is a really unusual view because this is taken from the center of Little Boca Raton Road, looking west towards Town Hall and so on. And so I haven't ever seen this view except in this image. Today, if you were standing in this spot, the Tower 155 complex would be over your right shoulder behind you. Here's a view of the south side of the street, a very modest little building, which still stands also. Back in the day, it was a market and also an appliance dealership. The 56 phone directory lists 3 grocery stores: Dave's on Boca Raton Road, Penn Jenkins and Willie White's Grocery on North Dixie Highway, and Quick Check, a supermarket on Southeast First Avenue. Very late 20th century. One of the fun businesses in town in the 50s was the Selleck Watercycle Corporation. They made these bicycle boats. Perfect Florida business. We had a couple of tourist attractions in the 50s to bring people to town. Africa USA was a safari park, African safari park, about where Camino Gardens is today. It was a very successful attraction and lasted until the early 60s. Up the road, north of Yamato on Federal, was Ancient America. And this was a pre-Columbian burial mound that you could actually walk through. And there was a museum and, of course, a store there. And that operated in the mid-50s. Meanwhile, evangelist Ira Eshelman established a Christian resort community on war surplus land and war surplus buildings west of today's City Hall complex north of Palmetto, called the Bible Conference Grounds in the 1950s. And in 1954, more than 2,000 guests registered at the 100-room conference hotel from almost every state and 8 foreign lands. Bibletown generated 4 separate housing developments, including Paradise Palms, Conference Estates, and the Starlight condominiums on 4th Avenue. And today it is survived by the Boca Raton Community Church. Restaurants on Federal Highway in 56 include Bob's, Brown's, which was where Flanagan's is today, and Zim's, which is across the street where the Elegant Child is. And you can see an inset of the patrons at Zim's. We also had the Garden Restaurant and the Waffle Shop. And you can see businesses beginning to pick up on Boca Raton, on Federal Highway in the mid-50s here. North of the Palmetto Park Pavilion was an old 20s bungalow that was renovated to become Smitty's Driftwood, or the Driftwood Beach Club, in the early 50s. And it was a restaurant nightclub with a wonderful location. And there was a swimming pool there, and the Red Cross taught swimming to the local youngsters. South of the pavilion was another 1920s mansion, really, that was converted in the 50s to a restaurant called Hermanson's, another popular beachfront spot. A lot of special events took place here, rehearsal dinners, graduation celebrations, and that kind of thing. It had beautiful, beautiful views. Other restaurants from the time included the Harlem Inn and Miss Lila Goddard's on North Dixie Highway. And on East Palmetto Park Road were the Boca Italian and the Griddle, just east of Federal Highway. And the Griddle is one of the few businesses we're talking about here that is still around on Spanish River Boulevard. It opened in 1956. In the early 50s, Mr. Shine owned the Boca Raton Hotel, and in 56, he sold it to a man named Arthur Varney Davis, one of the wealthiest men in the world at the time. The sale was for $22.5 million, supposedly the largest real estate deal in Florida history at that time. So this definitely made the papers, and an article in Time magazine. Hot stuff for little Boca Raton. From 46 to 54, our fire chief was John Lugery, and he and his family occupied an apartment on the second floor of Town Hall, which really is still an apartment. We just took the kitchen out, made it into offices. He had volunteers working for him. They would earn $3 a fire and $2 per drill. In 1954, Dan Andrews joined the force. This is a picture of Town Hall in 52 when it was the fire department and everything else. I believe the jail was located on Northwest 2nd Avenue, an old funky wooden building, but everything else went on at Town Hall still. Our mayors in the 50s included J.C. Mitchell, Dr. William O'Donnell, Louis Zimmerman, Bill Pop Day, Harold Turner, Bill Herbold, Roy Shores, and Joe DeLong. In 1957, the town of Boca Raton became the city of Boca Raton as we changed from a mayor, city council, town clerk form of government to the city manager commission form that we have today. The first television station in South Florida was in Miami in 49. Now, there wasn't a whole lot to see, as you can imagine. I know that they used to broadcast the races at Hialeah and maybe Mickey Mouse or something. But by the 50s, we have Channel 5, WPTV in West Palm. And on June 19th of 57, they hosted a salute to Boca Raton Day. In attendance were our Mayor Shores and many of the town worthies representing all the various organizations in town, talking about the goings on in Little Boca Raton. So this was probably really, really thrilling for the town folk. December 2nd of 55 was the first edition of the Boca Raton News. Before this, we had a little mimeograph newspaper published from the late 40s to early 50s. But this was a real newspaper. Margaret Olson was the editor and the photographer, and the newspaper headquarters was her house, at least at the beginning. And the news was published until 2009. And as you may know, the newspaper from 55 through 70, 15 years ago or so, the Historical Society, with a generous donation from the Save the Gym Committee, digitized the collection, and it is available. It is searchable and available online through our website. The Boca News from 70 on was digitized by Google News Archive. But our search engine goes up through 70, and it's pretty good. So you may enjoy exploring that sometime. Well, we finally get some culture in Boca. In 1950, the Art Guild was formed, and their first show was at, sure enough, Town Hall, then known as the Municipal Building, in the council chamber and the lobby. Now, here's a newspaper photo. I'm sorry I don't have a real photo. If you see the painting or whatever it is at the upper left, and next to it is a little wall sconce. And we have these sconces in the collection. And that's how I know it's a council chamber. And they're pretty darn ugly, by the way, but we have them. 800 people attended this. I wish we had great attendance like that at some of our special events today. From 48 to 56, our library was housed at the Municipal Building in what is used to be the office, will now be the Meisner Room at Town Hall. It is interesting to know, even though it was in the Municipal Building, the city did not take over management of the library until 1966. In 1951, local musicians, under the directorship of retired Boca Raton Air Force officer Phil Azzolina, formed a municipal band. And the band performed under the auspices of the Parks Department at Christmas tree lighting and at parades and swearing-in ceremonies. And of course, they became the Boca Symphonic Pops, the Boca Pops. When Phil passed in 1970. He passed the baton to his son, Mark Azzelina. The American Legion was very active in this era, and still are. And to raise money, they held several sports car races in Little Boca Raton. And the races were held at the former runways of the base, so where FAU is today, which had, tons of asphalt. And there were competitors from all over the place. International cars were entered in the race. And oddly, we don't have any good photos. This is another newspaper photo of the actual race, but we have plenty of photos of the sports car race queens, because of course you couldn't have an event like this back in the 50s without having a beauty contest to advertise it. And here we have the queen and her court for the Miss Sports Car Race 1958. And they are posed at the Cabana Club in front of a beautiful vehicle to advertise the race. Boca's developing, of course, and we finally get some new suburban style housing, family style housing, fairly reasonable. One of these new communities was Boca Villas, west of Fifth Avenue, but east of what is today Meisner Park. And in the early 50s, you could buy a home then there for between $10,000 and $13,000, a modest home. And while homes on the estate section between the ocean and the intercoastal south of the inlet went for between $40,000 and $200,000. Now we'll have a test about this in a couple of slides, so keep that in the back of your mind. Meanwhile, in 1953, some investors took what had been the Palmetto Park housing project, a wartime housing project south of today's City Hall, and converted it into the Boca Raton Garden Apartments. They did a lot of renovations and they added some buildings. And the Garden Apartments were owned by the Cameraman family. You may remember that for many years. The Garden Apartments were some of the least expensive housing in town. So many families who came to town in this era, this was their first home, the Garden Apartment. So a fond memory by many people. Finally demolished in the 70s. Here's a couple of new developments in this era. North of 20th Street, west of Federal, we have Winfield Park, and north of that, Chatham Hills. In 58, Mr. Davis, who now owns the hotel, forms Arvida, that sounds for Arthur Viney Davis, with banker Milton Weir as his president. They begin developing, the great developers of much of Boca Raton. Their first project was Royal Palm Yacht and Country Club, south of Camino Real, south of the hotel complex, and east of Federal, in 59, and originally planned was a 9-hole golf course, yacht club, and polo field with 744 homes, early homes selling for $65,000. Meanwhile, way up north on 2nd Ave, the developers of Carroll City in Dade County, which is where Sue is from, go ahead with their plans for Hidden Valley, which had just been annexed by Boca Raton. But this advertised says Hidden Valley is at Delray Beach. So we're back to our test question, and that is, which development should you have invested in back in the 1950s? I know what I think. In the 50s, we had 3 public schools, the Boca Raton School, Roadman School, and J.C. Mitchell. And until the very late 50s, Boca Raton School actually went grade 1 through 8. So it wasn't Boca Raton Elementary, it was Boca Raton School. And then you would go to high school. So in 56, 57, we know there were 395 students at Boca Raton School, which stood where Boca L is today. And these are cheerleaders, 7th and 8th graders. And back in those days, they were the Boca Bobcats. So before Boca High was the Bobcats, before J.C. Mitchell was the Bobcats, the Boca Raton School were the Boca Bobcats. I had that on good authority. Meanwhile, the African American community was served by what was called the Boca Raton Negro School, which was a wooden school kind of in the middle of Glades, where Glades goes through between Dixie and Federal today. And in 56, it was renamed Roadman after that businessman I mentioned previously. He was also on city council, and he had been a great benefactor of the school. He donated a television, for instance, when that was a very big deal back in the day. So he passed rather prematurely. And so the PTA asked the school board if they could rename the school, and that happened in 1956. Now, the little school was phased out in the 60s with desegregation. It had a very small student population, and unfortunately, it was destroyed. In 1958, we get a new school, J.C. Mitchell, named in honor of a longtime mayor who had died in 55. And for the first year, it was, again, grade 1 through 8, but immediately became a junior high school when the county adopted the junior high system. And that's what most of us remember it as. Now, our high school students, until 63, had to go to Delray to school. The Black students went to Carver. The white students went, depending on when you're talking about, Delray Beach High, became Seacrest, became Atlantic. So we didn't have our own high school till the 60s. A lot of organizations and clubs springing up in the 50s. The Lions Club was one of the first service clubs. It was housed in a former wartime building west of 2nd Avenue, Northwest 2nd Avenue, and south of Spanish River, a few blocks. And their clubhouse was served as the clubhouse for many other local organizations. In 53, Mrs. Shapiro established a local chapter of the Toy Clinic of America. And this is where people gathered to make dolls and soft toys for distribution in orphanages, hospitals, and clinics. It was very popular. The Deerfield Business and Professional Women's Club had a lot of Boca Raton members. You see some of them posed here. The occasion is an induction ceremony at the Sun Cove restaurant in Deerfield in 56. The JCs were very active in this time. They were busy trying to make sure the newest state university, which turned out to be FAU, was coming to town. But and you can see they jetted around quite a bit, the JCs. In 57, they organized a midget league football team, which they named the JC Jets. Today, it is the Boca Jets. Love this picture. One of my favorite. Make me laugh. Cub Scout Pack 327 met at the Boca Raton School. And in 1958, they performed a skit entitled Who Will Rule the Universe? And you may recall that in 1957, the Soviet Union had launched Sputnik, which began the space race. With no high school in town, the teenagers needed someplace to hang out. We didn't have a mall back then. And so with the help of Jim Rutherford, can you believe he was that young, who was head of parks, the Teenage Center or Teen Town was born. And it was located in a kind of a modest, let's put it that way, building that had been part of that Palmetto Park housing project. And you can see it's not too glamorous, but never mind, it was theirs. And you can see the large picture shows a semi-formal dance, probably the Christmas dance. I see the Christmas tree there. So many, many happy occasions were held at the recreation center. Now to your right, we have some city employees teaching a bunch of teenagers how to be pool sharks. I love that picture. Jolene Mucci is the queen right there in that particular picture. And I know that you can't have Teen Town or anything like that without having a queen. So Miss Deanna Baker here, she was actually Miss Teen Town 1960, but she was crowned at the Christmas dance in 1959 in full regalia, as you can see. The Garden Club, founded in 53, with 119 members by the end of the year. So popular and has continued to be so until this day. Boca Raton was not the unbelievably landscaped place it is today, a little scruffy and a little deserted. And here you can see some new plantings on the west side of Federal Highway in the 300 block. So today, Meisner Park would be on your right. In the 56 city directory, we have these churches: Ebenezer Baptist, First Baptist, St. Gregory's Episcopal, the Community Methodist, which is now the First United Methodist Church, Macedonia AME, and Church of the Open Door. Catholic residents were very happy when Father Heffernan came to town to establish St. Joan of Arc Parish. Our Jewish families had to go to Fort Lauderdale, and it wasn't until '67 that the Boca Raton Hebrew congregation was formed, now Beth El. The photos include the community church on East Royal Palm Road, east of Federal Highway, and the First Baptist Church Vacation Bible School. Mr. Shine opened the amenities of the hotel to the local folk in the off season for a reasonable fee. And so here we have Carl Douglas reenacting his hole-in-one at the 14th hole of the Boca Raton Hotel's course, Memorial Day of 1953. And a fond memory is the Cabana Club, which was located where the Addison condo is at Via Cabana on A1A, south of the inlet. And of course, that was the hotel's beachfront access back in the days. I am told by the longtime resident that it was full of ratones. And of course, sports, real important entertainment in those days. The Boca Bombers won the state softball championship in 1951. Carl Douglas was a star of that team. This is his bomber jacket, and there he is posed here with the bat. He is accompanied by Joan Olson. I don't think she was really the catcher for the team, but little Chip, Carl's son, and Miss Dorothy Steiner, who was our local beauty queen. She was a Miss Florida and a Miss America runner-up, as well as holding many other titles, and a professional model, both beautiful ladies. In the end of '55, Eleanor Sanborn donated the property across the street from Town Hall, which had been a bus station, to the city as a park in the memory of her husband, Doc William Sanborn, who was a longtime snowbird. And it was renovated and became the village green for our town's Sanborn Square, the scene of the Christmas tree lighting, all sorts of special events, and really a political forum and the center of town even today. Mr. Davis brings polo to the town. That had been a dream of Addison Meisner. And the original field was actually south of Camino Real in what is today Royal Palm Yacht and Country Club. And it was just there a couple of years. A new field was constructed at Glades and Military starting in '58, called Davis Field, modestly. And the first practice game was held there in May of '59. St. Patrick's Day was a very big deal in the '50s in Boca Raton. In '57, everyone came to Sanborn Square to hear the municipal band and listen to Dr. William O'Donnell sing Irish tunes. He was an accomplished tenor. The American Legion Honor Guard led the Seacrest High Band into the park, and it was followed by a shamrock float from the Teenage Center. 1950, Boca Raton census showed a population of under 1,000. By 1960, almost 7,000, and by '70, 28,500, and then it just got sillier after that. So this was the last era when we were a quiet little hometown. And interestingly, this is when we begin the influx of retirees and snowbirds to Boca Raton, because of course one can live longer and live better at Boca. If you're interested, one of our Spanish River papers is called 50 Facts, and it was put together by Pat Editor Jakubik, and she just had a ball doing it. She used, number one, her memories, but also our photo collection, our newspapers, our 1950s era city directories, and phone books. And you can download that. That's a PDF available on our website under the Research tab, Spanish River Papers. I hope you enjoyed this little trip back in time. Next Thursday, we are going to hear from our Assistant Curator, Patricia Fiorillo, who will be talking about Pioneer Voices, some of her selections of favorite memories that she has learned about in our collection. So thank you all for joining us.